Hello everyone, my name is Gabriela and today we'll talk about what happened in the following days of this crisis. And in the slides you can see that the Kennedy is signing the quarantine approval of Cuba, which is basically a blockade but renamed to quarantine to make it appear softer and not threatening to Soviet Union. As US Ambassador Alday Stevenson explains the matter to the United Nations Security Council, United States ships already move into position into waters to surround the Cuba. Soviet submarines move into the Caribbean as well, and they were positioned as if they might break the blockade. But Soviet ships bearing military supplies headed for Cuba stopped in their tracks. So, Assistant Secretary of State of International American Affairs Edwin Martin seeks a resolution of support from the Organization of American States. Ambassador of the United Nations Alday Stevenson lays the matter before the United Nations Security Council. And then the ships of the naval quarantine moves into place around Cuba. Soviet submarines threatened the quarantine by moving into Caribbean Sea as well, while Soviet ships bound for Cuba with military supplies stopped dead in the water, but there is one oil tanker Bucharest continues towards Cuba. In the evening, Robert Kennedy meets with Ambassador Dobrinin at the Soviet embassy. And after the Organization of American States endorsed the quarantine, President Kennedy asked Khrushchev to stop any Russian ships heading towards Cuba. The president's greatest concern is that U.S. Navy vessel would otherwise be forced to fire um, upon Russian vessel and probably set a war between two superpowers. And Khrushchev writes to Kennedy rejecting his demand that Soviet removes the missiles, which the Soviet leaders insist that it's just for the defense purposes and nothing else. And Kennedy writes back bluntly reminding him that this crisis started because of Soviet Union and his leader to sending missiles to Cuba secretly. So the October 24, nothing much happened, only that chairman of Soviet Union Khrushchev replies to President Kennedy sent letter on October 23 accusing him of threatening the Soviet Union. And in the slide you can see the original letter, what he stated, but I will just say that the most important statement is that Khrushchev wrote that you are no longer appealing to reason but wish to intimidate us and threaten us, and we can fight back if we will need to. So the next day, October 25th, knowing that some missiles in Cuba were now operational, the president personally drafts a letter to Chairman Khrushchev. And again, I will put a picture of the original letter, but basically in the letter he argued him to change the course of the events. Meanwhile, Soviet ships turn and head back to Europe. The Bucharest, the oil and petroleum ship carrying only petroleum products is allowed throughout the blockade, or as well called as quarantine line, and two American warships, the USS Excess and the USS Gearing, prepare to take over the ship, which could have led to the war. Instead, Kennedy decides to let the Bucharest through the quarantine because it isn't carrying any contraband. United Nations Secretary General calls for a cooling off period, which is rejected by Kennedy because it would leave the missiles in the place where are they right now. And that's it for me right now, and we will continue.